Hey everyone, back at it again with another Speedpaint video. This time talking about Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. Just recently played through it, and and wanted to do another Speedpaint video about it. It's definitely a game worth talking about, and a game worth drawing stuff about also. And I kind of like doing these Speedpaint video projects because it's a good opportunity for me to talk about the game, and my experience playing it, and do some cool art relating to the game, and make a video about it all at the same time. So I think maybe this will be a regular thing for me. Who knows? Playing through Paper Mario Thousand Year Door remake right now. Maybe I'll do a video about that, but who knows? But anyway, the topic of today's video is Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. Won Game of the Year in 2019. Pretty impressive feat. Probably deserving of it. I admittedly should have done my research a bit, but I just played through it, and it's another From Software game. You know, Dark Souls, Elden Ring, Bloodborne, Demon Souls, those games. You know, all from the same people. And in short, I had a great time. Sekiro is a very very fun game. Um, It was a healthy divergence, and I actually think I liked it more than Dark Souls 1 and 2. I played through Dark Souls 1 in its entirety, including the DLC. I played through like 30% of Dark Souls 2, um, and I liked it more than that. I don't know if I liked it as much as Elden Ring, per se, because Elden Ring felt like way more of an epic adventure. It felt way more personal because that game didn't revolve as much around the story as Sekiro does, so it was a lot more about your adventure. But anyway, to stay on topic here, Sekiro. The best way to describe Sekiro in a few sentences is that it's a healthy divergence from the usual From Software formula. Most From Software games, or at least the Dark Souls games, Elden Ring too. I can't speak for Bloodborne, but their usual formula is it's action. It's an action game, but focused more on RPG elements and not so much the fighting mechanics themselves. It's about going out into this cool, kick-ass fantasy world, and finding and like fighting monsters and enemies, and picking up loot, and leveling up, and boosting stats, and fighting bosses, and all that cool stuff, which is awesome, and it does it excellently. But Sekiro challenges all of that by having you have one main weapon for the whole game, and you get upgrades along the way, but I'll get into that. There's not as much emphasis on builds because it focuses more on the combat itself and performing different moves and skills and abilities. And there's more of an emphasis on stealth rather than diving in head first like the Dark Souls games. There's a lot more stealth mechanics. There's a grappling hook so you can get up onto rooftops and sneak around and like backstab enemies for a one-shot kill. And it does it excellently. You know, it feels like a From Software game intended for stealth mechanics. And there's a lot of really cool moments that utilize that ability really well. And there's so many there's, well, not really that many actually. And another interesting thing is about the game is that the dying mechanic. Oh yeah, I probably should have said it earlier, but spoilers. I haven't gotten in too far, so you know. If you really want to play it and have like your own experience without getting spoiled, I guess stop watching. But you know, you can watch anyway if it doesn't matter that much to you, because you know the only spoilers you can really get are like the story, and I guess some mechanics. But maybe you're better off hearing about them. I don't know. It's up to you. And so to get back on topic, a key mechanic in the game is that when you die, you have a chance to revive. Not a chance. You can revive yourself. You can get back up on your feet and keep fighting. Um, and when you die, common enemies that you were fighting think you died, so they continue to walk away. And then when you get up, you get a free backstab on them. So that's a really really cool, unique mechanic for the game to have, and it factors into the lore because the lore of the game is something about like you're a shinobi, which is like an assassin or some shit like that, and you gotta protect your lord as per the Iron Code of a shinobi, which is like a ninja times 1,000 or some shit. I don't remember, but yeah, you gotta protect like this little kid, and the story revolves around your relationship with this kid. Not really the relationship. I take that back. It's about like the story of trying to protect this kid, and this kid has the ability to grant immortal life, and lots of people are after him, and it's your job to keep him safe, and the story sort of revolves around that, and the story in this game is frankly awesome. It's really cool, and unlike the other FromSoft games that are less emphasis on story and they're more emphasis on your personal experience playing the game, the story is there. The story of the world and the environments are there if you care to look for them, but you have to look for them is the thing. But whereas here, the story is right there. There's cutscenes, there's dialogue, there's reoccurring characters, and everything that you'd expect from a good story. And it doesn't, and it's awesome. The story is awesome. All the characters, like like Owl, your father in the game, he has his own good story. I'm not gonna give too many hard spoilers on the story. I'm just gonna talk about a few moments. By the way, Owl's story is really interesting. How he kind of seems like just an average good dad at this when you start, but then as you play the game more and more, you learn that he's actually a real scumbag, and he only ever used his son as a means to achieving a goal, and how all he wants is, and he's just a trickster to the end. And he has some cool boss fights, and I could talk all day about some of the boss fights, but I'm just gonna continue. Um, I'm gonna go into the story a little further, a little later, and there's a lot of cool sequences. Like like one of my favorite sequences in the whole game is like the reoccurring like giant stealth enemy, or no, giant serpent enemy, which was really cool. There was a lot of really cool stealth sections where you gotta like sneak around because it's like a giant serpent, like kaiju size. Manda, the obscure snake kaiju from the old Godzilla movies. Anyone? Um, there was a lot of really cool stealth sections with that. There was another stealth section kind of like that late in the game, but I kind of ruined it for myself because I misunderstood that it was a stealth section and I had enough health to just tank through it, which was kind of funny, but also a shame that I missed out on another cool stealth section, but it's whatever. And another big compliment, I'm a little scattered here, so I hope that's alright, but another big part about the game that I really liked is success is determined more by player skill rather than the player's knowledge. Like, because like for example, in the Dark Souls games and even Elden Ring too, um, there's always an OP build. There's always OP weapons, or like if you put your stats into this specific order in this specific way and you use this specific item, you can just breeze through the game no problem. There's nothing like like what you'd expect from an RPG. Every RPG kind of suffers from that problem. There's always going to be OP builds that just kind of over optimize the fun out of the game. And but Sekiro didn't have anything like that because there's no skill points necessarily, or no stat points rather. Um, there's far more emphasis put on the moves, as I said, and the combat system, which very unique combat system. might I add. Um, it encourages the player to play well rather than look for another new weapon to fight a boss. Like the parry mechanics are great because the posture mechanics. I should probably start talking about that. So the main combat system in this game is that rather than other action games in general, not even just FromSoft games, it's about like dodging attacks and blocking attacks and trying to get the enemy's health bar to zero before he gets yours down to zero, right? Makes sense. But here there's an emphasis put on posture, which means like if you're fighting an enemy and you hit him multiple times and he blocks all the hits or he doesn't block the hits, he has a posture meter that builds up. They have a posture meter that builds up more and more, and when it's full, their stance is broken, and then you can do a death blow move, and a death blow is the one shot kill move. And because of this, it sounds weird at first, but once you get into it and really start playing, um, you're gonna fall in love with this because it further emphasizes it as like an action game unlike any other, you know. And 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 some of those bosses, they're tough. Some of those bosses are tough. And again, it's not about like, oh, it's not like a DPS race. You know, it's not about like, oh, I'm not doing enough damage. It's about like, no, you're not dodging enough attacks. You're not parrying enough attacks. And because when you do, and with precise parry input timing, you can lower the enemy's posture meter even more. And the game focuses far more on that than anything else, which is great. It sounds weird at first, and it's weird to play at first. And this kind of leans into another point I was gonna make later, is that it's tough to get into at first. When you start playing, it feels very weird, and it takes a bit to get into because and it can seem kind of off-putting because the combat system is a little more complicated than it may seem. It seems more complicated than it really is, but it's like, oh well, what's the point of health bars if you're just looking to get their posture meter down and then one hit kill them? And it's like yes, but that's what makes this game so good, is that it's not like other games, and it's super balanced, and it's more about player skill because there's no extra weapons. There's prosthetic tools also, which are basically unique abilities you pick up that like each have different effects on enemies in the world around you, which all do different things and act differently on different enemies. But they all have their own sort of niche uses. So that's like extra abilities, but none of them are OP. You know, they're just like extra little things to sort of help in a fight. And and just the amount of like skill required to beat the game is really well done. It feels very balanced, and there's a lot of times when it feels less like the boss is OP and I'm just bad. That the boss is OP and it feels unfair. It felt more like each death I had felt more like I was doing something wrong. You know, like I should parry more attacks. Oh, I got to get the parry timing down. Oh, I got to learn that attack pattern. It's never a matter of like, oh, I don't have enough health or my stats aren't good enough. It's like, no, I just gotta get good. And that's something every game developer seeks to accomplish in their game. You know, having it based more on rewarding the player for being of good skill, without making them without them needing to be what do you call it? Approved by a good build, the approval of a good build. Um, Yeah, and speaking of early game, the early game felt harder than the mid and late game for me. Um, it could just be a matter of me getting used to the unique fighting system, which is definitely there's some of that. But the early game bosses, like they all have moves. Like for example, the ogre, the first like major like wall boss that you fight, bro's got three command grabs, all with different timings, and other moves that you're supposed to parry. So it's just super awkward timing to like learn. And it's I died more to the first boss than I died to any other boss in the game. I died to him way more, and it was by a lot. It was by a lot. The only boss I almost died to more, I think, was the corrupted monk, the phantom version, the one I'm drawing right now. And but once I got and that sort of made me start to like not like the game because it felt super weird because it's like, oh, what's this bullshit posture system, like what's the point of all this? Like this feels so weird and unnecessary. But once I got into it and I started to learn that it was more based on the player's skill rather than the good stats or knowledge of the game, I started to really like this game and I started to really get into it. And all the boss fights became so much more fun. They felt more like fun challenges to see like how good you've gotten since you started playing. And I love boss fights in games, so and this game has a ton of great boss fights, so you can imagine I had a blast with each fight. And yeah, and the and towards the end of the game, I didn't I started to die less and less to new bosses, actually. I first, second, third tried most of the mid to late game bosses. Some took a few more than that, but it was but yeah, it was really tight. And some criticisms I can give the game is that the music was all right, but it didn't stand out to me that much. I know that the FromSoft games aren't exactly known for their music. It's more atmospheric. It's not like bombastic action music like something out of Metal Gear Rising or like God Hand or like the other platinum games, kind of action games. But it didn't quite. It didn't quite. But it didn't quite hit the notes that I think it could have with me. And another criticism I can give it is that I don't know how I feel about two mechanics I don't know how I feel about is that so rather than have typical levels like you would in any other RPG, you have skill points, and every time you level up you earn a skill point, and if you get enough you can like unlock like new moves to use in combat, that sort of thing. And it's a really, again, it's it plays into like how it's a healthy divergence and how it's different from the rest, and it does it really well, and it does. But you can't reasonably get everything in one playthrough. It kind of encourages you to do a second playthrough, which is fine, I guess. But I don't know how I feel about it because it's like I shouldn't have to play through the game a second time to see all the content, that the game has to offer. Like play through the entire game a second time. It's okay to have post game content. I encourage that actually. But like an entire second playthrough to unlock everything, I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know if it's bad necessarily. It's just something I have a little gripe about. There's also some of the and also another criticism is that like the prosthetic tools I almost never used. I didn't use like most of them. Some of those like tools are so niche use that like you'd never have a reason to pull it out in a typical playthrough, which just felt super weird. And there's to go back to the characters for a bit. There's a lot of great characters in this game, like Lord Kuro, who you're looking after. The relationship with Sekiro and his father Owl is really interesting to watch unfold. the sculptor and his story, Hanbei the Undying, who had his own spin-off manga that I encourage anyone listening to read, because it's a super great like side story talking about like a small character and giving a whole big backstory to a side character. And he had a good story in game, and how you kind of how he was also an undead like you are, how he can just kind of get back up after dying and can never die. A lot of great themes in the game. A lot of these characters play into the themes of the game about how like immortality isn't all it's chalked up to be. And to quote Frieza from Dragon Ball, being unable to die would likely result in unending misery, which is a common theme in the game, is that life, death, and immortality. It's immortality is not all it's made up to be. And Hanbei the Undying, just to talk about a few smaller character moments. Hanbei the Undying, when you unlock the Mortal Blade, another key thing in the story is that you're supposed to travel the land and find the Mortal Blade, which is a special blade that can sever immortality from those who will never die, and you use that to kill all the bad guys who are immortal. Right? Makes sense. But this character you meet, Hanbei, he when he finds out you have the Mortal Blade, he wants you to end it, and because bro just wants to be at rest. There's I don't want to spoil too much, but that's a really powerful moment for me. Another really powerful moment is when you're about to fight Owl for the first time, and he says to betray the Iron Code and accept the order of his father. You're supposed to betray the Iron Code, and like in the early game, you're kind of led to believe that you should follow the Iron Code, because that's the code that all shinobis live by. And one of those rules is that the parent is absolute, and you must follow their will no matter what. And for like the first half of the game, it encouraged the game. Leads you to believe that you should follow this too, but then it reverses it when your father tries to use it against you for his own means, and only to use Lord Kuro's ability to grant immortality for himself, and the game encourages you to disregard the Iron Code. I really liked that kind of switch up on the morality of the story. The sculptor and his story, how he was once a shinobi, and he went through a whole bunch of shit that I don't remember, admittedly, but and like not really characters, but the boss fights are all great. Like the Guardian. Some of my favorites are the Guardian Ape fight. That was really cool, and they give you an awesome like fake out thing. That's when you first learn that there are others that are immortal, other than one of the main baddies, because it fakes you out thinking that you killed him, but then he gets back up just like you do. Genichiro was a really cool fight. How you gotta like ride the lightning and throw it back at him. The Corrupted Monk, who I'm drawing right now, that was a very impactful boss fight. On my playthrough, that was one of the tougher bosses in my playthrough, at least. And it had a big impact on me, and I really remember it. And it was so satisfying. And the thing is with these bosses, it's so satisfying when you either when you beat them after a lot of tries and you finally did it, or when you beat these bosses within a few tries and you realize just how much better you've gotten at the game. That's something this game does really well. It makes you feel like you've gotten better at the game when you start taking less tries to kill these new tough bosses. That's a big compliment I can give to the game. You can feel yourself getting better, or at least I did. That's in my experience. I hope everyone else felt like that too. But yeah, there's a lot to love in this game, and you get attached to the characters when you start getting invested in the story, and you see how the story plays out, you get really invested and you want to see what happens next with these characters, and you like want to see the best for them, and you want to like the story in this game is, in my opinion, the best in any From Software game that I've played so far. Elden Ring's story was cool and all, but again, you can ignore this. You can entirely ignore the story if you wanted to. And but in Sekiro, the story is like there. The story is out there for anyone. Like the story is like you can't ignore the story in Sekiro, and it makes it very worth your time to not ignore the story because they do fantastic. And all the mini plot lines throughout the game, all the characters you meet that all live throughout their own little stories. It's all done beautifully. It's awesome. Just what they accomplished with this game. Definitely deserving of Game of the Year 2019. I had a great time playing it. And for anyone listening, I would really recommend playing From Software games or action games in general. Elden Ring opened. I played Elden Ring, and it opened me up to the entire world of action games. You know, the platinum games. Even back when they were Clover, I played God Hand, and then I played the Dark Souls 1 and 30% of 2, and now Sekiro, and gonna try and play Dark Souls 2 next in my From Software list. But yeah, fantastic game. I can't iterate that enough. And there's the finished picture. Inspired me to do some really good art. Well, I'm not great at action shots, but you know I'm trying. I'm trying to get better with it, and definitely could have done a little better here if I was a better artist. But it inspired me to do a lot, and I hope it inspires you too if you decide to play it. So that's all I really have. Stay tuned to the channel. I have some other ideas in mind for stuff I want to do with this channel, and stay tuned. Ring that bell, leave a like, drop a comment if you've played Sekiro, and tell me what you thought. And I encourage everyone to play this game and all the other FromSoft games. If you've stuck around this long, thanks so much for your support. It means a lot. Yeah, good luck out there.